Hey, this is Tyler Harmon. Thanks for listening. A while back, we did a full-day Marketing for Founders seminar for early-stage founders and owner-operators. There's a lot of really great insights in here from years of growing startups that I think any founder might find valuable. But before we dive in, just a quick disclaimer. This is a series cut from live recordings that I've edited down to about 4 hours of content. These concepts are easy to grasp, but it's calorie dense and there's very little fillers in here. So take your time with it. So without any further ado, let's get to it and try to keep up. Okay, so let's really have some fun now. Let's get into psychology and behavioral economics. First, there's imagination, and then there's realization. But not realization like, oh, I just realized he was lying to me. But the other definition of realization, something causing something to happen. Like on an accounting document, you have a company's realized losses. So there's another Harmon family saying we always say, nobody goes anywhere physically until they first go there in their mind. We have to picture this whole thing first. It could be something as big as buying a new car. You imagine driving this thing. You can feel the steering wheel and the leather seats and the music that you're going to listen to when you drive down this road during the day or with the top down or whatever it is. Or it could be something as simple as downloading an app that looks at the stars. You're going to hold this phone up against the sky and show your kids, and you're imagining this magical moment of wonder, and you're going to do it around a campfire on the top of a mountain. It's one of those classic expectation versus reality moments, probably, where it's not going to be as magical as we dreamed up in our head. It could be you're in the store and you're picking out a new hat or a new pair of jeans, and you're thinking to yourself, man, am I going to look cool showing up to this party in these new pair of pants? So, as a business owner, what can you do to improve that experience? This is a lot like the lottery ticket example I gave you earlier, where we got so much joy of simply imagining winning the lottery and all the things that we were going to buy. So a couple options here is maybe you just need better pictures of your product. It could be that simple. If they could see it better in different contexts, that might help. Or do you need more videos of someone talking about your products or testimonials about people using them? Maybe it's something like B2B software, where how can you make the people who buy the software feel like heroes to their bosses for picking this software, because right after they choose this, their sales are going to go through the roof. Let them fantasize about that. So this goes without saying, but our imaginations are so powerful. When we get excited about something, it's all we think about or read about, like going to the movies and standing in the line of the concession stand. You're thinking about the popcorn and the M&Ms and the drink that you're going to get. Or those Coke commercials that are actually in the theater when you hear the fizz of the drink and the ice clinking around in the glass through that Dolby surround sound. That's really hard to resist. The whole imagining of this experience is almost as good as actually sitting in the theater. There's this great quote I've seen a bunch of times from a bunch of sources. I don't know who said it, but satisfaction is the death of desire. This doesn't mean don't go for it, but as marketer and people who build companies and brands, definitely don't rush through the preamble. You're missing out on most of the fun if you deprive your customers of this part of the experience. So a lot of times, it's what you don't say. I've always used this example of laying a trail of breadcrumbs for a customer. If you leave the breadcrumbs too close together, they're going to see it and they're going to know that they're being led somewhere. But if you space them out just enough, they're going to think that they're the ones taking advantage of this situation. I read this quote from Orson Welles. He called it giving just a hint of a scene and then letting the audience contribute to it as well. All right, let's talk about status. It's people showing to the world who they are and the companies and brands they identify with. Like the guy who wears the Porsche hat or the Corvette hat. They want you to know. When we moved to LA, we used to live in this big apartment complex in Pasadena, and the garage was just filled with BMWs and Mercedes and Porsches and Maseratis. Like, you go into the hills, you see all these $10 million expensive houses, and you look and you see Toyotas and Fords in the driveway. Not always, but you see a lot of those. A really good example of this is Apple's Mac versus PC ads. They were all about status. So are you the frumpy idiot or the clever creative guy who uses the Mac? I work with a lot of movie studios, and the big guys always have really cool offices. They have all the posters of all the movies that they've worked on over the years. And the little guys follow suit, so they all show off all the cool stuff that they've been working on. And we do some crowdfunding for the movies, and then the investors in these movies, they do the same thing. Like, they're in the movie business too, and this is part of their identity. I would imagine, because I've imagined this too, that they fantasize about talking about the movie business at parties. Like, they're going to have this whole crowd of people listening to them talk about the movies. So they put the poster up, or they put the script or the book on their coffee table, and it gets noticed. It's like the guy who puts the picture of the bass that he caught on vacation. He puts it right on his desk, so you know, yo, this guy is the shit. But not every product has a status element. A lot of them do, though. Immediately, to me, I think about the red bottoms on those Christian Louboutin shoes, where it's the black shoes, and when you see them when they walk, the soles of the feet are bright red. Or it's the shirt with the little red hearts on it. Then you have these iconic colors like Hermes orange or Tiffany blue. So whenever we used to go to a wedding, we'd always go to Tiffany's and we'd buy a whole set of champagne flutes for the couple. Everybody else at the wedding, they all bring these white bags in the white wrapping with the white bow on it. But when you buy stuff from Tiffany's, they go all out and you get the full treatment with the wrapping and the boxes, and it's the giant blue bag with the little boxes. And when you walk in with that blue bag and pop that on the table full of white gifts, everybody stops and goes, wow, that 100% is a status move. By the way, when it comes to Tiffany blue, that's iconic now. It wasn't when they started. It's like the Warren Buffett quote. You want to make a big snowball? You need a lot of snow and a really big hill. And Tiffany's has had quite the big hill. But I'll give you fair warning that these things, they're hard to do. Bill Bernbach, one of the advertising greats, he once said, and he kind of borrowed this from Picasso, but rules are what the artists break. The memorable is never emerged from a formula. And by formulas, he's probably talking about copywriting formulas like ADA, problem, agitate, solve, before, after, bridge, features, advantages, benefits. Start there. I'll tell you to start there. Like, good comedians, they use misdirection to throw you off and surprise you with a good punchline. But this assumes that you're anticipating the joke and you know where it's going. One, that's leveraging those formulas. Use those to your benefit, knowing that you're going to stray from them. And number two, this goes back to Orson Welles, where you're letting the audience contribute. Then you can pull the rug out from underneath them. Now we can throw ChatGPT into the mix. These are the most derivative concepts that are coming out of there. Nothing is going to be new. So if your competition is using ChatGPT to come up with this, then you're in luck, because all they're going to be doing is using formulas. All right. Emotional versus rational. There's a lot of ways to talk about these differences, and there's 3 great quotes that I've heard over the years. First is from Zig Ziglar. He said, people make decisions emotionally and justify rationally. And then one of my favorite copywriters, Roy Williams, he said, win the heart and the mind will follow. And then there's the psychologist Jonathan Haidt. He said, logic is not the Oval Office. It's not the decision maker. Instead, it's the press room justifying a decision that's already been made. We like to think that we're these rational creatures, but we're not. Our mind, for the most part, is already made up. Now we're just looking for any excuse to justify our decision. And we will come up with the craziest reasons to buy it. This isn't really a crazy one, but it's on sale. Shoot, I was going to lose money on this if I didn't buy it right away. I hear people saying that they buy Teslas because they're good for the planet. I read this letter to the editor in the LA Times a while back about this guy who was embarrassed by his Tesla now. He bought the car because it was good for the environment. Now he doesn't agree with Elon Musk's politics, and he's worried he's sending the wrong message. It doesn't sound like he bought the car for the environment, does it? In fact, in the very first sentence of the article, he already contradicted himself, and he doesn't even realize it. This is one of those reasons that this saying is true. All things being equal, people do business with people they like. All things being not so equal, people do business with people they like. Like I said, we're emotional creatures who are just clever enough to make sneakers with lights in them. I'd like to think that we're analytical, but even most business decisions, they're emotional. Like if you meet any real estate developers and they have these big multi-million-dollar projects, they get so emotional when it comes to the negotiations of these things. It is not just business. Winning the heart, it's really about telling a story. We're hardwired as humans to live in tribes and tell and listen to stories. If all you do is just spew facts and statistics, you're not going to make many sales. They want to identify with you. They want to be able to trust you. And this is including the way your product is packaged, the colors you use, the pictures on the website. They're all little emotional signals. That's all there is. There really is no true objectivity. All right, placebos. We know they work in medicine, like the sugar pill. They do double-blind studies with 3 groups. They give them the real drug, the placebo, and no drug. And the mere act of taking a pill will do something too, even if you know it's a placebo. But that's because the placebos take place in the non-English speaking part of your brain. The ritual of taking the pill every day, even if you take it and go, this doesn't do anything, that still has an effect. I read about this study one time where they took these 3 groups of people and they had them practice shooting free throws. One group of people, they physically shot free throws in the gym for days and weeks. They had one group that didn't do anything. And then they had a third group that just imagined shooting. So when they did it, obviously the people who practiced physically shooting free throws improved when they went back to measure their skills. The people who didn't do anything, obviously they didn't improve. But the people who just imagined it without physically doing it, they got better by doing that. Another type of placebo is the nocebo. I've heard stories about people who tried to kill themselves by overdosing on these medications. They end up in intensive care and then they figure out that they were just sugar pills and they just magically get better. It's crazy. All right, here's a fun one. Coke versus Pepsi. I've done the Pepsi challenge. I really can't taste the difference. It is so hard. A friend of mine once did it and he was able to find a hack. But that's the only way that you can really discern the difference successfully. You basically have to cheat. You can't taste it. They taste the same. I'm telling you, I've done it. But then they'll tell you, oh, we win the blind taste tests. Yeah, so did New Coke. How'd that work out for them? If you want a fun story, read about the abysmal failure that was New Coke. Just Google it. So Coke versus Pepsi. That dark caramel color they use, that is very important because without it, people think it tastes like Sprite. And then when you go to a restaurant, you ask for Coke, they say, is Pepsi okay? Of course it is. Nobody's going to know. Other placebos, another drink, wine, it tastes better in a fancy glass. Way better than if you try drinking it out of a Yahtzee cup. So if you go to a restaurant, it definitely tastes better if you get the whole wine show. They show you the bottle and they open it and you put it in the glass and you swirl it around and you taste it. it sets up the expectations for you to enjoy it, and you want it to taste better. So it does. Or electronics. A lot of people think that heavy electronics are more valuable. I always think about that scene in Jurassic Park when they're in front of the T-Rex exhibit. The little kid, he's got those goggles, and he's looking out the back window. And the lawyer that's in the truck with him says, "Hey, where'd you get those goggles?" "Oh, I found them under the seat." He asks, "Are they heavy?" And he kind of weighs them in his hand and goes, "Yeah." He says, "Well, then they're expensive. Put them back." I play guitar, and I like the old 1950s Les Pauls, because in the 1960s, they put weight relief chambers in the body of the thing to make them lighter. And a lot of people say, "Oh, they sound different now." But I think it's just because when it's heavier, it just feels more valuable. So whenever I pick up a really light guitar, I've already kind of decided that it feels cheap and it's going to play weird and sound hollow. I just totally make it up. What about price? Price is a great placebo. Have you ever had a cold sore and you got it the day before you're supposed to go to some party or get photographs or something, and you need it gone by tomorrow? And then you're in the store and you see all the options of the cold sore medication. There's the $2 tube, and then there's the $20 tube that's in the big shrink-wrapped package. You look at the back, you look at the active ingredients, you look at the inactive ingredients, you can't see a difference. Which one are you going to buy? You're going to buy the expensive one, because what if it works better? I can't take a chance on this right now. All right, let's get into behavioral economics. Most economics in general is based on assumptions. So I'm going to say a lot of these assumptions out loud, and you're going to say, duh, but I think the light bulb's going to start going off too. So there's a few of these definitions here. The first one is perfect substitutes. It's also called homogeny. It's when one product is just as good as the competition, you can easily substitute them. Another one is perfect information, that all customers have complete information about all the prices and all the functions of all the products that they can pick. Another one is perfect trust, where nobody has a preference or a feeling about a certain product or brand. Then there's optimization, that we're always going to choose the best option that's out there. And it also assumes that we have no self-control issues, that we always act in self-interest. So perfect substitutes, perfect information, perfect trust, optimization, self-interest. So one of the most famous behavioral economics guys out there is Richard Thaler out of Chicago. He says it's fine to start with unrealistic models like the physics of the vacuum of space, but if we're going to send a spaceship to the moon, we better eventually consider the atmosphere. So these normal assumptions, they assume that we're selling these products to Spock, when really we're selling to Homer Simpson, or rather, Marge Simpson. David Ogilvy, he said, the customer isn't a moron. The customer is your wife. So, of course, not everybody is a member of Mensa, but you don't need to have an IQ of 132 to buy a Mercedes-Benz. We have biases, but most of the time these biases are moot in the sales process. So leave them alone. I remember one time I went and sat down at the bar and I asked the bartender, "Give me a glass of Lagavulin neat." The bartender, he looked at me and he was very snooty and he said, "You mean straight up?" "No, I don't mean straight up. I mean neat." Technically, up in bartending means it was shaken with ice and strained like a martini. So straight up could be confusing. It could go either way. That's why they have the whole word neat, which means pour it from the bottle into the glass. But I'm not here to give this guy a bartending lesson. All I want is a little bit of scotch in my glass poured from the bottle. Whatever this guy needs to hear to do that, by all means. So do you really want to correct these biases, or do you just want to sell your products? You can go blue in your face to try to make your points, but you're going to fail to sell your products. Or you can just ignore the fact that people see things differently and just acknowledge how they see things. So if you do that, you can sell a whole bunch of products. If they want their steak well done, let them. Unless it's part of your shtick that you don't do that. There's this story about this burger place in LA. It's called Father's Office Hamburgers. I heard that there's a lawsuit because the guy wanted no lettuce on his hamburger and they wouldn't do it. So of course he's going to try to sue him. So if you want to have like the soup Nazi where you are just so adamant about things, then maybe that can be part of your brand. But otherwise, don't pick these battles. Is that the hill you really want to die on? So a couple examples of behavioral economics in business and sales in marketing. The first one is Starbucks. They didn't call them small, medium, large. So you can probably charge, I would guess, a little bit more money for a tall than you could a small. Another one is free stuff. Instead of 50% off or discounting or rebates, you get a free iPad with a new air conditioner installation. And then there's decoy pricing. You have an expensive option that makes the other options look cheaper, or having a really cheap glass of wine that a lot of customers are too afraid to order. So when you start thinking about these things, you're gonna have trade-offs. Like we talked about this a little bit before, but defensible versus indefensible. So defensible is rational thinking. We can hang our hat on some kind of data, and if it doesn't work, we can justify why we made that decision. Versus indefensible, which is a pure risk. If things go wrong, we can't blame anybody but ourselves. But we know that people aren't rational, so why wouldn't we just want to try it anyways? Another way to think about things is explore versus exploit. So if you walk down the street and see a whole bunch of ants, they're getting busy on a candy wrapper. Then later, you're going to see one lone ant just walking around aimlessly. These guys are programmed to always be looking for the next thing. It's evolutionary. Basically, it's don't put all your eggs in one basket. We learned that in finance, Silicon Valley Bank, hello, or diversifying against stocks and bonds. The interesting thing is, what's defensible to one person could be indefensible to another. There's this psychiatrist, Anna Lemke. She explains the dopamine in our brains as like this seesaw. It alternates between pleasure and pain. And when we do something that's good for us, we get that hit of dopamine. We're immediately hit with the opposite effect of the dopamine, which was the pain. It's this balance, homeostasis. So from an evolutionary perspective, the system was designed to make sure that we don't stop looking for food once we eat the first time. Most living beings have this. It's in the lizard brain. It's very primitive. But as humans, we're motivated by dopamine to forage for berries or hunt for saber-toothed tigers. Today it's easier. We just push a button basically. There's not a lot of activity behind it. But with humans, we tell these stories with tribes. We're a pack animal. But we all have these different addictions. One person's going to go hunt for the berries. Another person's going to go off and hunt for meat. So depending on this wiring, we all have different proclivities. And today, we see this with different addictions like alcohol, drugs, gambling, overeating, shopping, social media, video games. There's lots of different addictions. The point of this is, because we're wired differently, one's crazy idea is another's same old, same old. This goes with decision making as well as value propositions. Someone might see value in your product differently than another person. So it's different uses, different status implications, the hierarchy of needs, everything. So let's talk about personality types, speaking of that. So I don't want you to call these personas. I'd rather you call them use cases, like from Crossing the Chasm, that are tied to a product. Really, I want you to get that book too. So don't do the predictable market analysis junk, like Janet is a no-nonsense mom on the go. Ugh. So in video game design, there are 4 personality types that they use for gamification. There's 4 of them. Socializers, explorers, achievers, and killers. So socializers, these are the people who play Farmville, and they're trading, and they're sharing, and they're helping, and they're interacting. This makes up 80% of most people. There are explorers. They're out there discovering the Easter eggs in the games. They're looking for secret passages, and they're going to go and explore all four corners of the map and see what's out there. And that's 10% of the people. There's the achievers, and these are people that are driven by points in status. And they start all the challenges right away and they just get going. They make up another 10%. Then they are the killers. And these are the people, they have to be the best on the leaderboards. And they're not happy unless other people are losing. This makes up less than about 1% of people. So, what kind of person are you? Do you get started on the challenges right away? Do you just start clicking on things, looking for hidden treasures? Do you go out and start exploring the map and seeing what's out there? Do you get really competitive? The takeaway here is, just like we talked about with the dopamine and the motivation, we default to our own way of thinking. And it's really easy to forget that not everybody else is like you. So maybe if you're the socializer kind, there's 80% of the people that are like you. But that's also a very broad brush to start painting with, and it has very little nuance at face value. So I want you to force yourself to consider these other personality types. You're probably overlooking a lot of things. But again, if you're the socializer, it's going to be easier for you because the vast majority is too. But not everything is social. For years, everyone was trying to have this social media experience with all their products. Like, do I really need to share my results from the blood pressure machine with my Facebook friends? I don't think so. To try to detach from your default way of thinking and just open your mind to other personality types. All right, then there's the curse of knowledge. Most founders, they're too close to their product to sell it effectively. One by one, you can be the most persuasive person. But unilaterally, one person talking to a lot of people, you don't get the feedback from the customer to know where to start. One of the best examples I ever heard about this was Schlitz beer. One of my heroes, Claude Hopkins, he was the father of modern advertising. He was born back in 1866, old school guy. He was the first guy to come out and say that ads should be measured on how well they sell. So he was the one who started direct response advertising. So back in the day, I think like the early 1900s, 1910, 1920, Schlitz, they were the worst performing beer company in the world. They invited Claude Hopkins to come out and see if he could help them do some ads for him. So they showed him around the whole property and showed them how beer was made. They went through the whole process, where they got the water. They dug these 4,000 feet deep artisan wells to get this very pure water. And then they purified the water over these really hot pipes and this purified air. And then they would sift it through these wood chips to just get the best quality water from there. They cleaned these pipes. They were adamant about it. They cleaned them twice every single day. Every single bottle was sterilized before they filled it with beer. And then they went through 1,200 different variations to find the perfect mother yeast cell for all their beer. And he said, why don't you talk about this? And the guys at Schlitz, they said, everybody else makes their beer the same way. So they made these campaigns and they talked about this excruciating process. And over the next few years, they went from dead last to the #1 beer company because of these ads. You can Google Schlitz beer ads from Claude Hopkins and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's so obvious now, but this was the first time someone really did this. If you go back and you watch the pilot to the Mad Men TV show, they did an homage to this, where Don Draper, he was working with the Lucky Strike guys, and they said, we can't talk about our health benefits anymore. And so he asked how they made their tobacco, and they said, we toast the tobacco leaves. He goes, oh, there you go, it's toasted. And so they said, no, everybody else does it the same way. He goes, Lucky Strike, it's toasted. And that's what they did. But be careful not to go too far the other way with this and get too in the weeds and bore everybody to death. So there's this great joke I heard from Zig Ziglar. There was this girl, she was Catholic, and she was going to marry this boy who was a Baptist. She runs to her mom and said, I don't think we can get married. He's not Catholic. Mom said, no problem. Let's just see if he'll convert to Catholicism. So the boy took the catechism classes, and he learned about the religion, and the wedding dates were set. Everything was on. So a week before the wedding, the girl runs back to her mother and says, cancel the wedding, call the guests, send back all the gifts, the wedding's off. Mom says, what happens? I thought we sold him on becoming a good Catholic. She said, that's the problem. We oversold him. He's going to be a priest. Thanks for listening. Next episode, we're going to talk about sales, including some clever ways to game the system and find some breakthroughs, and the 6 ways to increase sales. In the meantime, if you have any questions, suggestions, or need help with your own marketing, check out tylerharmon.com or the Rad Dad marketing website at raddadco.com.